Spokesperson Eric Schultz. Now, the Justice Department also with new developments this afternoon, now saying it will consider domestic terrorism charges in the mass shooting in Charleston. I want to bring in CNN's justice correspondent Evan Perez, also with us Anthea Butler. She's an associate professor of religious studies at the University of Pennsylvania, and you just wrote an opinion piece about the seeming unwillingness up until now to call this massacre an act of terror. We'll talk with you in just a moment, Anthea, but first to Evan. What is the Justice Department saying now regarding possible terrorism charges?
Well, Anna, you know, there's no doubt that if this young man had entered this church with a little black flag with Arabic writing, that there'd be no doubt people would be calling this terrorism. And so there's been a little bit of a debate here just because of the circumstances. And the Justice Department issued a statement. We have it up on the screen. And they say that the investigation is ongoing. They say this heartbreaking episode was undoubtedly designed to strike fear and terror into this community, and the department is looking at this crime from all angles, including a hate crime and as an act of domestic terrorism. The definition in the federal law of what terrorism is requires the prosecutors to look at whether or not the crime was designed to intimidate the civilian population, whether it was designed to force the government to do something, and those are the things that they have to take into account. That's the reason why at first they just focused on hate crime, simply because we know this suspect said the words that he was there to shoot black people when he entered that church. One thing I'd like to quickly note is that one of the earliest laws against counterterrorism in this country was an 1871 law which was passed to counter the intimidation of the Ku Klux Klan against black people in the South. So that's something to remember, because this suspect, Dylan Roof, was actually espousing some of those same beliefs that the Ku Klux Klan believed.
Thank you for all of that, Evan Perez. I want to bring in Anthea Butler. You just wrote a very poignant article in the Washington Post titled, "Shooters of Color Are Called Terrorists and Thugs. Why are white shooters called mentally ill?" What's your reaction to this announcement from the Justice Department?
I'm very happy to hear that the Justice Department is considering this as domestic terrorism. If we stop to think about the trial in Boston, only 3 people died in that terrorist bombing in Boston, and that was heinous. How much more heinous is it to kill 9 people in cold blood after going to a Bible study to a historic black church in a town where you know that the worth of this church and to the members and to the general public is an important place for black people to gather and worship. So I'm very happy to see this happen. I hope that it goes through.
Let me read you some of the words we've heard from officials over the last couple of days, even the president using some of these words. Senseless murders, unspeakable tragedy, hate crime, but we have not heard that word terrorism. Why do you think?
Well, I think because it is easy, because part of the media's issue with this and why I wrote the article was because we tend to make shooters like this to say that they're ill or they're fragile. I was just listening a little bit before I came on to how people have been referring to Dylan Roof as a young man and all of these other things. I think we want to soft pedal the gravity of the situation. He is a terrorist. He thought about this. He planned it. He talked to friends about it. He's been thinking about it for a long time. Clearly, he's connected to white supremacist groups. He's been wearing the flag of Rhodesia, of apartheid South Africa. And all of that, when you start to put it together, really is terroristic activity, as far as I'm concerned.
Where does this hate come from?
Well, it comes from a lot of places. I'm glad you asked me that question, because what we haven't really talked about in this country is the uptick in racial hate groups since 2008 and President Obama taking office. Guns went up over 90% in sales that first week that after the election. The Southern Poverty Law Center has chronicled how many more hate groups and hate speech has risen since 2008. America has been like this, and when your previous guest said about the KKK in 1870, 1871, this kind of racial terroristic activity is part of what America is all about, and until we begin to face this history, we are not going to be healed from this history.
Well, Anthea Butler, thank you so much for your thoughtful comments. Evan Perez, we appreciate the update on the Justice Department investigation, and that's going to do it for me. Happy Friday. Brianna Keeler is in for